on this family. The words landed like a punch across the room, cutting through the clinking of cutlery and awkward laughter. Silence followed, dense and suffocating. All eyes turned toward the end of the dining table, toward me. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. I didn't flinch. I just stared back at my father, Everett Langford, whose face had turned a furious shade of red. My mother, Lorraine, seated next to him in her perfectly ironed pastel blouse, nodded solemnly, as if that was the gospel truth. You don't even deserve our name, she added, lips curled in bitter judgment. I glanced down at my plate. My hands didn't move. I felt every heartbeat in my ears. Then came the laughter. My cousins, Trent, Ashlyn, and Haley, let out smug, muffled chuckles. Haley even leaned over and whispered something into Ashlyn's ear, making them both smirk as they looked at me. It was supposed to be a family reunion, Langford's only. A catered lunch at the lake house in Vermont, polished cutlery, cream linens, and enough wine to forget whatever sins the family buried over the years. But clearly, I wasn't part of that sacred legacy in their eyes. I opened my mouth, but no words came. I'd promised myself I wouldn't cry. Not this time. Not in front of them. Then a loud bang jolted the table. It was my grandfather, Benjamin Langford, 83, but still commanding. He slammed his hand down on the table so hard the water glasses trembled. The laughter stopped. That's enough, he barked, his voice shaking with fury. You should all be ashamed of yourselves. My father blinked. Dad. Don't interrupt me, Everett, Grandpa growled, rising to his feet. I've sat here long enough, listening to your arrogance, your judgment, your damn ego. And I won't stand for this cruelty a second longer. Nobody moved. My mother's face went pale. Haley slowly pushed her plate away, her appetite gone. Let me tell you something, Grandpa continued, walking around the table slowly, his cane clicking against the floor with every step. You all love the Langford name, don't you? The houses, the money, the reputation. But none of you have earned any of it. You sit here, mocking someone who's fought harder than any of you ever will. He stopped behind me and rested a hand on my shoulder. Myra, he said, eyes softening. Tell them what you did last year. My throat tightened. Grandpa. Tell them, he repeated, or I will. I slowly stood up, my voice trembling. I started a shelter in Boston. For women. Survivors of abuse. We helped over 80 women get back on their feet. Some of them had children. We housed them, helped them get jobs, even education grants. My father scoffed. You started that with whose money? Mine. I replied firmly. I worked nights at the clinic. Did freelance coding jobs. I sold my car. You did that quietly? Trent asked, visibly stunned. I didn't need applause, I whispered. Grandpa turned to face them again. None of you knew that because she didn't broadcast it. But you know what Everett did this year? He used company funds to silence a lawsuit. Lorraine spent $30,000 on a dress for one gala. Ashlyn's been using the Langford name to avoid DUI charges. And Haley's failed 3 college semesters in a row. Dead silence. And you call her the stain? Grandpa asked, voice rising again. You mock her because she doesn't play your elitist game? Because she chose kindness over inheritance. He pulled something from his coat pocket, an envelope, old and thick. Then maybe it's time you all heard the truth. This, he raised it, is the real reason I called this reunion. Everett looked nervous now. Dad, what are you doing? Grandpa didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the head of the table and opened the envelope. And what he read changed everything. Grandpa's hands were trembling slightly as he unfolded the old papers, yellowed at the edges, but his voice didn't waver. This, he said, holding up the top page, is a signed and notarized document from 1998. It's the revised Langford Trust Agreement. Everyone froze. My father's voice was tight. What revision? Grandpa gave a slow nod, his eyes burning with a fire that felt like it had been building for years. The one I made after I discovered what you were doing behind my back, Everett. Embezzling funds from the development firm and blaming it on your junior partner. I stayed silent to keep the family name clean. I thought you'd grow up. You didn't. My mother gasped. Benjamin, that's ancient history. History, Grandpa snapped, that shaped what happens now. He looked back down at the document. In that revision, I made a decision. One I never regretted. The tension around the table thickened. No one breathed. I rewrote the beneficiary list. Stripped you, Lorraine, and your children of all inheritance rights, every last cent tied to the Langford estate. Instead, I appointed a successor. Someone I knew would carry the name with integrity. He turned toward me. Myra. The room exploded in noise. Ashlyn stood up, so fast her chair clattered to the floor. What? That can't be legal. She's not even part of the company. She's not even married. Haley spat, eyes wide. My father looked like he'd been punched. You can't be serious, Dad. She's an idealist. A social worker, for God's sake. That's not who we are. Grandpa's face was cold as stone. Exactly. That's not who you are. But it's who she is. And that's why she deserves everything. He handed me the second document. The controlling interest in Langford Industries. The lake house. The art. The patents. It's all here. I was waiting for the right moment. I had to see if she'd stay true to her values even without knowing what she was walking into. I blinked in disbelief. Grandpa, I never wanted anything. I know, sweetheart, he said, squeezing my hand. And that's exactly why you should have it. The room was silent again. Until Trent, the golden boy cousin with the MBA and Instagram perfect lifestyle, muttered, You're handing the entire legacy over to a girl who hasn't even finished paying off student loans? Grandpa turned sharply toward him. A girl who's faced public mockery from her own family. Who's shown more character, more compassion, and more discipline than any of you ever have. If that bothers you, Trent, maybe that's a reflection of what you haven't done. I don't believe this, my mother muttered, grabbing her wine glass with shaking fingers. I do, I said, finally finding my voice. And you know what? I don't care about the lake house or the company or the art. I looked around the table, letting my gaze settle on each face. I came here hoping maybe that this year would be different. That you'd see me, not as a failure, not as a disappointment, just as family. My voice cracked. But you didn't. You never do. And honestly, that's on you, not me. I placed the documents on the table. I don't need your validation. I already had his. Grandpa smiled, proud and firm. My father sat down heavily, his jaw clenched. So what now? I take the reins, I said. But not for the money. For the women who need a roof. For the kids who go hungry. For every person you all looked down on while sipping from crystal glasses. Haley crossed her arms, but her expression had changed. Less anger, more shame. And then my grandfather spoke once more. The Langford name doesn't need to be about arrogance, pride, and greed anymore. It can mean something else now. Something better. Myra's going to show you how. I looked down at my shaking hands. The moment didn't feel like victory. It felt like peace. And for the first time in my life, I felt seen. The afternoon dragged on in tense silence. No one dared to leave the table. My cousins avoided eye contact. My father gripped his water glass like it might save him. My mother kept her arms crossed, eyes fixated on the floral centerpiece, as if it would somehow rewrite reality. I sat beside Grandpa, the weight of the documents resting in front of me like a mountain I never asked to climb. Grandpa, I whispered, leaning closer. Why didn't you ever tell me? He turned to me, eyes softer now but still sharp. Because I needed to know who you were without the money, without the pressure, without the inheritance. You were testing me? I was protecting the legacy. Our name was never supposed to mean expensive scotch and gated communities. It was supposed to mean grit, honor, loyalty. And if I told you everything too soon, you would have been pulled into their games. You stayed clean. I needed that. Across the table, my father finally found his voice again. You raised her to despise us. Admit it. You fed her this outsider complex, so she'd stay away, and you could play puppeteer. Grandpa stood again. I raised her to think for herself. Something you never allowed your kids to do. Ashlyn, who had remained uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. So what now? You expect us to just bow down to her? I took a breath and stood. No. I expect nothing from any of you. Everyone turned to me. I'm not here to humiliate you or rub it in your faces. But I'm also not going to pretend your treatment of me didn't hurt. My voice trembled. You all made sure I knew I didn't belong. You laughed when I showed up in thrift store clothes. You posted pictures on group chats without me in them. You made me feel like I was less than human. I stepped away from the table. But I'm not that little girl anymore. I don't cry in bathrooms after family dinners. I don't need your approval. I have my own life, my own values, and now a platform. And I'm going to use it. Trent laughed under his breath. To do what, exactly? Turn Langford Industries into a soup kitchen. I met his gaze. No. I'm going to transform it. No more silencing whistleblowers. No more secret settlements. We're going ethical. We're investing in communities. In green tech. In programs that create actual change. I'll take the empire you all fed on and build something that actually helps people. Ashlyn leaned back in her chair, suddenly unsure of herself. My mother scoffed. You sound delusional. I looked her straight in the eye. No, Mom. I sound free. The words settled into the room like a final note of a symphony. But then Grandpa cleared his throat again. I'm not done, he said, slowly lowering himself back into his chair. There's one more thing. Everyone tensed again. My heart thudded. I made another change to the trust. Myra's not just inheriting the estate. She's also the executor of all family properties and assets. My father stood. What? That's not just control. That's power of attorney. Yes, Grandpa replied. Because she's the only one I trust not to abuse it. He looked at me. It's yours, sweetheart. All of it. To protect. To manage. And to build something better. I felt dizzy. Like I'd just been handed a world I never asked for, but one I suddenly knew exactly what to do with. Are you sure? I whispered. I've never been more sure of anything. Behind me, I heard my cousins rise, chairs scraping back against the floor. One by one, they walked out, quietly, humiliated, no dramatic exit. Just shame trailing behind them like smoke from a long burned-out fire. My mother rose last. You'll regret this, she said without meeting my eyes. No, I replied calm. I'll recover from it, like I did everything else you threw at me. She flinched, but said nothing more. Only my father remained seated, staring at the papers in disbelief, mouthing silent protests like a man watching his castle crumble brick by brick. And me? I looked out the window, toward the lake, sunlight glittering over the rippling water. My voice was steady. It's time to clean the Langford name, not with polish, but with truth. The sun was beginning to dip lower in the sky, casting long golden shadows across the lake lawn outside. Inside, the mood had shifted completely. The reunion was over, at least in the way my family had planned it. The laughter had vanished. The snide comments, the smug expressions, the power plays, all of it was gone. They left behind silence. And truth. I sat at the head of the table now, not because I wanted to, but because Grandpa insisted. He rested beside me, his hands folded calmly on his cane, watching with a strange kind of peace as the last of the staff cleared the dishes and the others disappeared into separate rooms. You okay? He asked gently. I don't know, I admitted. You will be. I turned the pages of the documents in front of me again and again, trying to absorb it. Langford Industries. The properties. The accounts. Even the offshore, ones I'd heard rumors about. I'd gone from being the girl no one called to family vacations to the sole executor of everything that bore our name. And I still smelled like vanilla hand sanitizer from the clinic shift I did yesterday. Grandpa, this is huge.
Yes.
It is. What if I screw it up? He smiled, slow and warm. Then you learn. But you won't. I glanced at him. Why do you believe in me so much? His voice dropped, almost to a whisper. Because I've watched you survive storms none of them even noticed. You stayed kind. You stayed strong. That's not weakness, Myra. That's power. I swallowed hard. And then my father reappeared in the doorway. He didn't speak right away. His jaw was still tight, but the rage had dulled into something else. Maybe disbelief. Maybe shame. Maybe just tiredness. I came to say something, he muttered. Grandpa leaned back. Then say it. My father's eyes met mine. You think you've won something today, but you haven't lived the weight of being a Langford. You don't know the pressure, the politics, the expectations. You're going to realize soon enough that idealism won't survive the real world. I stood slowly, pushing the chair back with a scrape. You're right, I said calmly. I don't know everything about this world, but I know what it's like to be kicked down by my own family and still find the strength to get back up. I know what it's like to work all night and still show up for others. I know what it's like to be humiliated at every gathering and keep smiling just to get through dinner. I took a step closer to him. And I know that everything you just said is fear talking. You're scared because you know I'll do this differently. And maybe better. His face hardened. You think compassion makes you a good leader? No, I said. But it makes me a better human.
And right now?
That's the kind of leadership this family needs. He didn't respond. Just stood there for a moment before turning and walking out again. For once, without a parting shot. I exhaled slowly. Grandpa looked up at me. How do you feel? Like I just broke through a wall that's been there my whole life. He nodded, smiling again. That's because you did. That night, I stayed in the guest room I'd never been allowed in as a child. The room with the view of the lake. The same room my cousins used to mock me from, whispering about how I didn't fit in. Now it was mine, and I didn't need anyone's permission to be there. I sat at the window for hours, watching the reflection of moonlight stretch across the still water, wondering how many lives I could change with the opportunity I'd been given. It wouldn't be easy. They'd try to sabotage me. They'd question every move. But I had a vision. I had courage. And most importantly, I had nothing left to prove. The next morning came quietly. No dramatic showdowns. No one waiting at the breakfast table. Just the scent of fresh coffee and the soft creak of floorboards in a house that suddenly felt different, lighter. I stepped into the kitchen, where Grandpa sat with a steaming mug, flipping through the morning paper like it was any other day. Sleep okay? He asked without looking up. I did, I said. Better than I expected. He smiled. It's amazing what truth can do for your spine. I poured my coffee and joined him at the table, the same one where, just yesterday, I was called a stain. Now they were gone. And I remained. Later that day, I walked through the offices of Langford Industries for the first time, not as the girl no one recognized, but as the new leader. People whispered, stunned. A few smiled. Some didn't know what to think. I met with the board, firm but calm. I laid out my plans, investing in mental health programs, ethical business practices, community outreach. A few resisted. One man said, "But this isn't how we've always done it." I smiled. Exactly. By week's end, I visited the shelter I helped build. The women there had no idea I now owned the very company their ex-husbands once worked for. I didn't tell them. I just helped repaint the nursery wall. Because that was who I was. A Langford, yes, but on my own terms. And for once, that was more than enough. If this story hits you even a little, just hit that like button. It helps more than you think.